when you have a computer, right? dB is like usually how you measure sound, but with a computer, like, what is the unit when it's like 0 to 100 for your headphones? Is that dB? Or no, it's like a measurement of like 0 to 100% of the max volume it can do, which is whatever your device is capable of, right? So like, let's check this. Is there like a stats? I'm actually curious about this. If we look at my microphone stats. Oh no, wait, why is that at 54? Turn that up. But like, does the device have a dB amount? Cause then it's, oh, now it's really loud. Now it's decently loud. Because now it's like, what is the measurement? What is the units? That distracted me. But like, if you think about it, let's say, I don't know how dBs work. I don't actually really know how the unit works. But let's just say like, frame of reference, right? My headphones can do like 16 dB. Is it like, you know, at 16, is that 16%? Or of 16 dB, or is it 16 dB? I think it's 16% of 16 dB, right? Is that how it works? Is that how computers work? Is that how your headphones, like, has anyone ever, like, actually wondered about, besides me, because I'm weird, but has anyone ever actually wondered about that? Like, you know, when you just have your computer and you, like, look at your volume settings and it's like 100. What does 100 mean? What units is that in? What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean, chat? What does it mean? I have no goddamn clue. Casual crash outs while playing Ultrakill. My new favorite thing. Oh. I don't know how much time I have. I think it was about an hour until I have to go to bed to wake up for school tomorrow morning. Fuck school. Oh, I forgot to read the English thing I was supposed to read, but that's fine, I'll do that tomorrow morning. It's not like, it wasn't like a serious homework thing, it's just read this in preparation for class, and I can do that tomorrow on the bus, because I actually think I'm done, or almost done with my book series, so I'm going to get through it, and I'm going to have something to read, and I'll read that assignment, because I forgot. About Dr. Heidegger's experiment, and when I looked at that document, it sounded like it would suck to read. Old English, man, I don't like it. I just realized that, if I don't change the volume settings for the music, it's gonna get me fucking demonetized. I mean, I can't make money anyway, but it's gonna give me, it may be copyright strike. Because it's just playing us on loop. It's a good song though. It's fine, I'll just, instead of getting copyright strike here, I'll just put Deltarune music in. And then, have to deal with Materia Collective instead.
Materia Collective is a Seattle-based publisher that specializes in video game music. They release video game soundtracks and albums inspired
Actually,
by
that's like hell.
The Legend of Zelda.
This is like hell.
Pokemon Gold.
Just the idea of, oh, you know, you could get copyright struck in your videos, or have to deal with Materia Collective. I'd rather get copyright struck.
They release video game soundtracks and albums. And I'm playing Gaster.
Because Materia Collective is, annoying, to say the least. It's a Seattle-based publisher that specializes in video game music. Did you know that? Oh god, I still remember the Let's Unpack Undertale Yellow shit. Or the music from it. That was so stupid. That was like a CEO crash out of all time. And how much the community fucking hated him for that. Oh my god, I've never seen any worse Sebastian Wolf tweets, honestly. I believe Deltarune Chapter 5 next year. I believe it. I believe it could happen. You never know. Like, because it did take... Wait, math. Actually, never mind. Deltarune Chapter 2, what was that? 20... When was that? Wait. When was Deltarune Chapter 2? When did it come out? 2021. So it took 4 years for 2 chapters. So it'd take, and before that it was 2 years for a single chapter. But consider this, we know that Toby actually had like some Chapter 5 content that he was planning on releasing with 3 and 4, but he couldn't finish Chapter 5 in time, so he cut that stuff out and had to rework a few things. But we know that that was originally the plan. So I would estimate that a decent amount of Chapter 5 is probably already done. And so 1 year from now, and we could get Chapter 5. That's my thought, at least. My foolish hope, if you will. Because I want more Deltarune. Also, like, with Deltarune stuff, I know, we're gonna keep talking about that. So, a big theory in the community right now is that, Chapter 5 is gonna be end of Weird Route. And I believe that, based off of, like, the stuff we know about Weird Route, and, like, the evidence that points it towards it's going to end in Chapter 5. I do believe that. I'm not sure by end Weird Route in Chapter 5 if that, like, ends the game in Chapter 5. Which I wouldn't, like, necessarily, put, to, like, I could see that happening. I think it's less likely, to, like, make 2 chapters inaccessible to Weird Route players, but I do... Like, Toby Fox does a lot of weird shit. It like, you know, it could happen. Oh shit. But, I definitely think that at least the Weird Route content, as far as that goes, is probably gonna end in Chapter 5. If I had to guess. Just based off what we know and, like, what we've heard, I could see, or I heavily suspect that's what's gonna happen. Why didn't he explode? I got a coin into him. He should have exploded. Whatever. So I definitely think that's likely. People have been saying, like, with Chapter 3 theories, Asgore is going to be the boss. I really don't think so. I don't think so for a couple of reasons. So, Asgore's character he's not a violence kind of person. He's not gonna do that. The only reason he murders the other children, that sounds really bad, in Undertale, is, because he made a promise to out of rage when his sons died. But he's a very passive person. And he doesn't do it, he only does it because he has to. Or because he has duty to his people to get them away from the underground. And it's for the better of his kingdom, but he's not a king in Deltarune. He's not even the mayor. The mayor's Carol. He's just a dude with a flower shop. And he knows that if he kills more people, that's not gonna get him back with Toriel. Which is like his only character motivation in Deltarune, is getting back with Toriel, and it's not going to fix that divorce. So, I highly doubt he would fight the player, especially since the player controls Kris, and Kris is his son, so it's like, he's not going to go and fight Kris, you know, because Toriel's going to look at that and be like, that's bad, right? and never want to talk to Asgore again, and I don't think Asgore would like that, and I also don't think he would harm Kris, because we've seen in the chapters that he cares about Kris deeply. So I really think it's unlikely that he's like a boss. He could be an antagonist, maybe, that just doesn't fight Kris, but like tries to get in his, or not Kris, but the player, and tries to get in their way in accomplishing things. But I also don't think he's like too associated with Carol. Like, they're best friends, and Carol is working with the Knight, but I don't think Asgore is. He has a black fragment, sure, that points him towards he might know something, but, and it's going to happen in his flower shop. That's where the next chapter is going to take place. But I don't think he would. He just doesn't have like a character motivation. Or at least I don't think he does. And it also goes against his character in such a way that he needs a very deep reason to do so. And I don't think he has a reason to do so. Or at least not a good reason to do so. So I don't accept that idea that people have been throwing around, that he's going to be like a big antagonist, or the boss, or the final boss of like Chapter 5. Like, that's just not Asgore's character, and he's definitely not going to do something like that to Kris. From a lore standpoint, it just wouldn't make sense. But I do think he's definitely gonna play a big role in the chapter. I think he's gonna be like a very important character in the chapter because, I mean, it's in his shop. He's probably gonna be involved in some way, at least. Like, you can't dispute that. But I don't think it's in a villainous way. I think personally the role he's gonna fill is more anchoring the player's choices, kind of. Because, like, I think he's gonna serve as a main bridge between, or a main display of how our choices affect the people of Deltarune and the world. Because, like, first of all, he is very much, that's kind of his purpose in Undertale, is to show you how your choices have affected the Underground. By killing him in one hit versus trying to spare him, that dynamic he fills in Undertale as well. But I think it would anchor the player's choices to a more personal level of, like, you know, this is what you're doing. Directly, we could, like, see our choices in a dark world affect the light world, because Asgore is part of the light world, and we could see how that all functions. But I don't think he's going to serve a purpose of, like, you know, antagonism. It's just he's going to be like an anchor for the player, is what my thought is. Definitely not like some people have been throwing around like Asgore mentor, and I don't see that for a couple of reasons. I don't think Asgore is very wise. I don't think he's wise. Especially with like how he handles the divorce situation, and he's just like, he's a desperate man. Like that's what he is. But I definitely don't see him as a oh, I hate mind flayers. I don't see him as a wise person. I see him as a very pacifist-ish person, and like a very, what I'd consider morally good person, but I don't see him as a wise person. I don't think he necessarily understands life in the way that you'd want from someone who's wise. But I do, and also it's very unlikely we'd have another mentor character in chapters, because we just had the old man for Susie as a mentorship role in chapter 4, so it's like, it's kind of like weird to have two very similar story beats right next to each other in chapters. That's just like bad. that doesn't help. That doesn't make the game better. So I highly doubt he'd do that. It'd be oversaturation of that kind of trope, and we just had it. I personally think he's again more of an anchor character, but not a. And he'll have definitely more of a role than he has had previously, and I'm excited to see that, because Asgore is like one of my favorite characters. Despite how much I just dissed his intelligence and wisdom, he is one of my favorite characters. I know I just, like, went off on him very harshly, and I'm sorry, Asgore. But I do think, that stuff's interesting. I think we're gonna get a lot of, I mean, we're definitely gonna get a lot of weird route, maybe even the end in 5. I think we might get some Gaster stuff. And I know, like, everyone always pops off about Gaster, but unlike with Undertale, where I didn't feel like Gaster was that important of a character, like, I mean, he like, guys, we can admit that Gaster was, like, not important, like, at all in Undertale, besides the little background shit with the labs. He didn't do shit. He wasn't important. He was just, like, this crazy entity that everyone crashes out about and is like, this guy's behind everything. It's like, okay, guys, chill. It's just this dude. It's just Mr. Wingdings himself. But, you know, I think he's definitely, like, 1,000 times more important in Deltarune, because he's literally behind the entire thing. Or, it's very easy to see him behind the whole thing, because he's, like, in the game's fucking code. Which is crazy. Toby Fox is crazy. He's so meta, it's honestly nuts what he's doing with the game. But yet, W.D. Gaster's in the game's literal source files. Like, that's weird for a character to be in the know it's a game, be in its source files, and be pulling strings. That's going to be very important at some point. And I think we're going to see some Gaster stuff in 5. Especially with, like, the connection between Gaster and the eggs and the Forgotten Man. I think Forgotten Man points towards there being something more with Forgotten Man in Chapter 5, and if we are right about Forgotten Man being Gaster, we're gonna get Gaster stuff in the next thing. Oh, not Plasma. Oh god, no, that's not what it's called. What is that called? The rainbows on these enemies. I forgot. Oh no. Oh, things are getting really rough. Where was I? Right, Gaster. So yeah, Gaster's important. Let's talk about who's the knight, right? Because that's what everyone likes talking about with Deltarune these days. I see the most amount of people say Death Knight, and I understand why people say Death Knight. And I agree that it makes sense for it to be Death Knight. But it's just too many people are like, it has to be, that I'm now, like, not happy with that answer. And I actually did some research. And by research, I mean watching, like, 2-hour video essays in my free time. That's what I call research. But I've got new opinions on the matter. I don't think Death Knight is true. I think Toby's the type of person to do two throw-off characters, like red herrings. So Carol's obviously the, like, main red herring. That's the one for casual players, the one that, like, obviously it can't be Carol. I mean, it's like, it's just there's too many signs pointing to it, and it also doesn't line up correctly. So we can eliminate Carol from the discussion. And then we're left with, you know, the main argument is that it has to be one of the holidays, because antlers. That, I actually disagree with that. I mean, yes, it could be antlers, and that's what it, like, looks like, but, I personally think it could be other characters, but specifically there's this one theory I saw a video on that was Asriel Knight, and I really like that theory. It does a great job of, like, covering up so many loose ends with, like, normal holes you would find in that theory, that it really gets to be something that I think that is very likely now after watching said video, and I'll link it in the description. But I think Death Knight, the problem with Death Knight that I have, at least with Death Knight, is that first of all, Death doesn't have a motivation, and second of all, we know where Des is. Like, she's lost, quote-unquote, but we know from, I forgot whether it's Chapter 1 or Chapter 2, but that thing in the code where Des talks to you. Like, you guys remember that? Or was that from one of the articles? Whatever. That thing. We all remember that, right? Wherever that was from. That thing where she's talking in the code. She's clearly, during that state at least, still her normal self. Which means I don't think she would go on a rampage creating dark fountains and destroying the fucking world. You know, because that's not what you normally do to your little friendly town that you grew up in. You know. So I don't think she's likely to do that, and we know she's in the game's code. And she's stuck there, and we don't know how she got there, but she is stuck there, and I suspect Gaster put her there. But we know she is stuck there. And from that conversation, we know that, at least at that point, she was perfectly sane, so how does she go from that to being the knight? I have no clue. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. So that's why I don't think she is the knight, because it just doesn't add up correctly. And I mean, sure, Toby can do a whole whatever and not make sense, because he does that all the time, but it's just one of those things where I have a hard time believing that it would be like that, just because it doesn't line up correctly to me. So I think it's more likely that it's either Rudy Knight, which is a fun little theory that is pretty interesting, or Asriel Knight, and I personally think it's Asriel Knight. I want to clarify a few things about Asriel Knight that I cannot remember if the video states, but they're thoughts I had on my mind. With Asriel Knight, we know that from Undertale, we know that Asriel has a hard time dealing with loss. When he lost the other child, I forgot what the name was. It Kara? I think it was Kara. When he lost that child, that was basically his foster brother. He has such a hard time dealing with it that he becomes that loss and that frustration turns him into Flowey, and we see that happen and how hateful and sorrowful and mournful he becomes because of that. We know his character doesn't do good with dealing with loss, and I suspect that the same applies to Des. I mean, they were very good friends in Deltarune. So we could easily assume that Asriel didn't deal with Des's disappearance well, and probably that's what caused him to be evil, just like in Undertale. But why I think it's likely is we know he went to college, right? That's what they say. But what if he didn't go to college? I mean, like, I think it's very weird that there isn't something wrong with Asriel, because he doesn't strike me as the type of person that would, unless he was dealing with that loss and was doing evil stuff, would cut off all of his ties with his family. And we know that he hasn't ridden from college to either of his parents or Kris, which is weird. I mean, very weird. So something's up with that dude. And we know in Chapter 2, when you, when you're sitting there and you can, when you can look through the doors and you, like, to look at the search history, and you look at, like, Kris doesn't allow you to look at Asriel's. You can't look at Asriel's. That means Asriel has to have at least something involved, and people have chalked that up to Kris protecting his brother's search history, which, like, yes, but, like, why would Asriel, first of all, if you're doing bad stuff in your search history, why the heck would, one, he not clear it, and two, he do it on the public computers in the library in Hometown? That's really dumb. I don't think Asriel's that stupid. So I don't think it's likely that it was like a Protect Brothers search history thing, because, like, why would he be doing that shit on school computers, like that, or the library computer, like that? Huh? What? So it's more likely that either Kris, like, and Kris is in direct affiliation with the Knight, so we know that Asriel has to have at least something to do with the Knight, otherwise why would Kris not let us look in that room? There has to be something related to the Knight in there, and we know that that's Asriel's search history room, which means he has at least something to do with the Knight. We can all agree on that. But if he is the Knight, that makes sense, because there's this one video about Friend that I think is very good, and explains a lot about Friend, but I'm gonna talk about a few points from there. Friend's colors are pink and gold, and it is supposed to represent, or at least it represents in Spamton's case, giving up relationships and love for money and fame and fortune. And that's what Spamton does when he makes a deal with Friend, who is Mike. But if we apply that to Asriel, it makes sense that he would cut off his ties with everyone he knows from hometown if he made a deal with Friend. Right? He traded those relationships for... We can abbreviate Spamton's wealth to success, and if Asriel made a deal with Friend that exchanged those relationships in exchange for success in his endeavors, which are to try to find Des, and maybe the way he thinks he can do that, because he can't let go of losing people, which we know from, again, Undertale, and his character there, we can assume that he thinks somehow he's been convinced by something, perhaps Friend, or perhaps Gaster, or perhaps someone else pulling the strings, maybe even Carol, that he will be able to find Des by upsetting the balance between the light worlds and the dark worlds, and creating Titans, and causing the cataclysm and the world ending and all that bullshit, might bring Des back, or find a way of, or find Des, or something like that. He could very well think that, and then that would explain why he's creating Dark Fountains, and why he's being, why he traded his relationships away, and why he's cut off from everyone in hometown, and explains his relationship to the Knight. So really, everything works out if you follow that theory, which is why I personally think it's correct. Also, you know, knowing Toby, it's not above him to reuse the same antagonist in a different light between these two games. Like, it makes sense, and some people, you know, they bring up that argument of, like, oh, Asriel was the antagonist in Undertale, so it'd be super redundant to make him the antagonist again. Yes, but does Toby care? Look at his narrative decisions. The man doesn't care about basic, normal storytelling beats. He just skips them. So I think it's decently likely that he could be doing that. And I think it's also not too redundant because it's used in such a different manner that it'd actually be really interesting. So that's my stance on it, and how I think. But again, I'm not good at thinking about video game theories. I'm very, very stupid when it comes to that. But personally, that's how I do it. I don't think Flowey will ever appear in, even though I think Asriel Knight is possible, I really doubt that Flowey will ever make an appearance in Deltarune, just because that's very much an Undertale thing. Flowey was a product of the events of Undertale, and I don't think it makes sense for Flowey to also appear in a different universe with different rules. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, it really doesn't make sense. Also, let's talk about Rouxls Kaard. Rouxls Kaard is very interesting to me because he feels very much... He plays a very similar... Not a very similar role, but a like-minded role to... If you even understand the difference between them. I know what I just said were two synonyms. I was like, not this, but another word that's a synonym of the word I just stated, which means I'm an idiot. But, I'll explain. I think Rouxls is similar to Sans in Undertale for a few reasons. We know that Rouxls plays a role where he's in every chapter, and he's a joke character, which is what Sans was, and you have no reason to suspect him for being anything other than a joke character, because he's super stupid, super incompetent. He has a lot of power, though. Like, a lot of power. He's just unable to use it, or, you know, he appears to be unable to use it effectively because he's stupid. And that's why he loses to the Fun Gang literally all the time. But think about it. I mean, Rouxls can teleport. Why can he teleport? Why is he in every Dark World? Why is he not limited to one? I mean, literally, he's in every single Dark World. Like, the only other Darkener we know that can do that is Rouxls, and Rouxls is weird because, he's weird, and people go crazy theorizing who, or rather, what Rouxls really is. Like, some people think it's Kris's knife, some people think it's Kris's scarf. Like, there's so many different things. It's all related to Kris, because, you know, Kris. But, like, Rouxls is weird. He's the exception. But most Darkeners, like, we see that in Chapter 2 with Lancer, can't go outside of their... They stonify outside their Dark Fountain. But Rouxls doesn't. Rouxls is everywhere. Rouxls is part of everything. And that's weird to me. And in Chapter 2, yes, you carry the Rouxls Kaard into Chapter 2. Like, yes, along with Lancer. Which is why he's in Chapter 2. That part makes sense. But why is he in Chapter 3 and 4? He's not in your inventory at that point. You're not carrying the Rouxls Kaard. So why is he there? He just appeared there. How did he get there? Why is he there? Why can he teleport between Dark Worlds? Why can he teleport within Dark Worlds? Why does he have so much power? What is up with Rouxls? I think he's more than just a joke character. I think he's like Sans in that matter. And I think he's going to become very important in later chapters of Deltarune. He might be like Sans, although I personally don't believe he's gonna do the same thing with Judgment or like that at the end. I don't think he's gonna be like that. I think he's definitely gonna play a role, though. And I have a theory that he's related on the Gaster side of things, rather than what other force there is. I think Rouxls... I don't know. Rouxls is just weird. But he's definitely more than he lets on. He's not just a stupid old dude who is very bad at using his immense power that he for some reason has, and is constantly a joke. Like, there's something up with that dude. He can't possibly just be doing these normal things without... There has to be a reason for it, and he's got to have at least some importance in Deltarune. And I feel like... I don't think we're going to see much Rouxls in Chapter 5. I don't think he's going to do much in Chapter 5. But I do think Rouxls will maybe play more of a part in Chapter 6 and 7. Chapter 6 and 7 are very much a blank slate right now. We don't know much about them. We know a decent amount about Chapter 5, but not really much about Chapter 6 or 7. That makes it a really blank slate that you can push anything onto, but I do think that the reason why I don't think we're going to see much of Rouxls in Chapter 5, is that we don't have enough build-up for Rouxls to be like that. We don't have enough of him just being a comedy relief character for him to fully subvert expectations. Like, yes, it would be a surprise, but it's only been for 4 things, right? I feel like he's got to have at least one more, especially because, like, he actually doesn't appear besides one very, very, very hard to get cutscene, or, like, fun event. He doesn't actually appear in Chapter 4. He only really appears in Chapter 3, and 2 and 1. So, my comment about him being in every chapter was technically wrong, because he's not in Chapter 4. But Chapter 4 is weird. We don't talk about Chapter 4. Chapter 4 has too much lore. I can't digest it. It's just too much. I also didn't finish playing it. But Rouxls has only had 3 times which he appears and does shit and loses to you. One of those times is him just trying to give you a puzzle in Chapter 1. He does that like a couple times, and he fails. And that's all Rouxls does in that chapter. He doesn't actually fight you. In Chapter 2, he fights you in that minigame with the boats and the houses. That one's very weird because he does turn to stone, which is very, very weird to me. Because in Chapter 3, he doesn't turn to stone. And so in Chapter 2, you could assume that he's not supposed to be in that dark world, and that's why he's doing that, like Lancer. But the problem is he doesn't do that in Chapter 3. And Toby's not one to forget plotlines. He's not... That's not a mistake, or at least I don't think it is on Toby's part. I think that was intended, and I don't know... I really don't know what that means. Why Chapter 2 Rouxls turned to stone and he didn't in Chapter 3. Like, it's really weird, so it indicates that Rouxls doesn't turn to stone in other things. Although no one in Chapter 3 turns to stone until all the way at the end. Which is a fair thing, you could say. Right, and that could explain it. But also, even when Rouxls turns to stone, because he's not supposed to be there, he still plays very important roles in each chapter. He's trying to be the assistant of the villains. And he fights you multiple different times. And each of those times, he uses a different tactic in fighting. And yes, we just got an actual fight with him, like an actual battle, that wasn't a minigame or puzzles. But, you know, and you could say, well, that's the end. You finally did a normal battle, like, what more could he possibly do? But I don't accept that. I think Toby has another minigame up his sleeve with Rouxls that's gonna have a lot of lore in Chapter 5, and then we're actually gonna get full Rouxls understanding in either Chapter 6 or Chapter 7. That's my personal idea on that, or how I think it's gonna go, or what I think is likely, in my opinion. But also my opinion's stupid. Because it's, like, half of it is facts, and the other half of it is, gut feeling, which, you know, isn't very good when you're trying to convince people, hey, I believe this. Why? I don't know. It just feels right. That doesn't, do much for you, besides actual facts, and I haven't been mentioning a lot of those. But personally, it's how I view Rouxls, and what I think is going to happen with Rouxls. He's definitely got to be at least more than he lets on, because he has so much power, and where does that come from? How'd he get it? What, like, why can he teleport? That's, like, the weirdest thing. He can teleport. Like, no one else can teleport. And that teleport has the same effect, the same look about it, that the Gaster blasters do. That Sans uses, like, what? He's related to Gaster. He has to be related to Gaster. I mean, it's the same. And you could just say it's a beam of pixels, but in Deltarune, there's other beam attacks with pistols. or no, with pixels that are white, and also in Undertale, and they don't have that sparkle or that shine that the Gaster Blaster ones do, that radiance. That's specifically related to Gaster, which means it has to be a Gaster-related thing. So Rouxls at least has something to do with Gaster, and Gaster's very important because he is pulling the strings behind all of Deltarune, so there's something up with Rouxls. And we're gonna find out at some point. Because he's definitely not just a joke character. Also, what wave am I on? 19? Oh, Jesus. So, that's my Deltarune thoughts. I just said a lot of shit about Deltarune. Like, a lot. I'm trying to think if there's any other things. Also, I don't know if Toby batched this, but if he didn't, he needs to. Why is there not a place where you can refill your spin cake in Chapter 4? Toby, where's my spin cake? I need it. Where is it? Why can't I refill my spin cake? It's, whatever. Old Man. Old Man was great, in Chapter 4. Biggest clutch. Okay, here's something I don't understand. Why is it that Kris can no longer play, or, well, not no longer play, but, like, I don't understand the difference between when you try to play piano in the hospital. I forgot what chapter it is in, I think it was Chapter 2. And, like, you can, and Susie says, oh, you were messing with me, you can't play piano. And then, in Chapter 4, when you play piano in the Dark World, you know, we know Kris can. He does, and he does it very well. So why is that? What is the change in either Kris letting us, or the soul suppressing his ability to do so? Because it's weird, right? Because he can't, or won't, in the light world when they're in the hospital. But then he does in Chapter 4 in the Dark World. Maybe it's because he has to, because it opens up areas, but I don't think that's right. Also, it's a secret, isn't it? So he doesn't... Whatever. There's a weird thing happening with Kris and Piano, and that's just a side thing that probably isn't too important, but maybe it is. But I find it weird. Like, why does Kris either not want to play, or is incapable of doing so with the soul in the hospital in the light world, but in the dark world he can very well? Well, I mean, the song is called Piano, that might not be played that well, but it's actually played decently well, so it's like Kris can play. So that's something that's weird. But whatever. That's just, you know. Whoa, okay. Now, I personally, when it comes to Deltarune theories, I talked about why I think Death Knight isn't right, and why I think Carol Knight isn't right, but I didn't talk about why I think Rudy Knight isn't right, and the reason is because I don't actually have a reason. I just think Asriel Knight is more likely and makes more sense, but Rudy Knight is very interesting and is something that, if we don't get Asriel Knight, I would much rather see Rudy Knight than Death Knight, because Death Knight's just not interesting at all. And I don't know why people think it's super likely. I mean, it is super likely. I mean, there's so much evidence pointing towards it, but it's just not interesting. And I don't think Toby... right now, Chapter 4 is like a midpoint in the story, and we still don't have a interesting, or a piece of evidence that makes it interesting for Des to be the Knight. which is why, or not interesting, I mean it is interesting because she betrayed everyone, but we don't have a motivation for her, or at least a key. We wouldn't have one until like chapter 6, but we don't have like a piece of the puzzle yet. Because theorizers haven't really done much with motivation, or even theorized about motivation. They've just been like, Dessa's knight. And it's like, okay, but why? That's an important thing. Why is a very important thing. Innocent until proven guilty. You need a motivation, guys. But I just think Rudy Knight, like, from a storytelling perspective, would be a much more interesting thing than Death Knight. If we don't get Asriel Knight. I personally think Asriel Knight is cooler and also more likely. But Rudy Knight is also very cool and has a lot of evidence pointing towards it and is a good theory. Friend is Mike. That's something that I will not accept anything other than. If friend isn't Mike, I'm gonna refund Deltarune. No. If friend isn't Mike, I'm gonna be very surprised. Like there's a good video that talks about why it's likely that friend is Mike, and it's good. It's very good and it makes a lot of sense. So that's my thoughts on Deltarune related stuff. Man, I've been talking a lot. My voice is scratchy. I need to get water. I also have to go to bed in 15 minutes, so I'm gonna cut it here.